Chapter 1. Arabia before Islam. Of the human races that contributed to the ancient civilization of the world, the Semitic race was one of them. The Semitic race occupied a special place in the history of mankind. Arabia, the birthplace of Islam, was the original home of the Semitic race. 2. The Arabs were called Semitic, after the name of Sam, son of Hazrat Noah R. Musa, the founder of Judaism, Isa, the founder of Christianity, and Muhammad, the prophet of Islam, were the sons of this Semitic race, and the East was their homeland. Of these monotheistic religions, Islam is the third and the last. In course of time, the Semitic people migrated to different places and became known as the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Aramaeans, the Phoenicians, the Egyptians, and the Hebrews, Jews, in history. Though the Semitic race was known in different names, they must have lived in Arabia for some time as one race before they became differentiated. The Arabs were the descendants of the Semitic people. It is said that in ancient time there was a place named Araba, adjacent to the province of Tayama in Hijaz. In course of time, the word Arab is derived from that Araba. But according to others, Arab is originated from the word Yarab. Yarab was the name of the son of Qatan, who was the predecessor of the people of South Arabia. The Western writers have called the Arabs Saraceni. The word Saraceni is said to be derived from the word Sahara, which means desert. Arabia is a vast peninsula in the southwest of Asia. It is the largest peninsula in the world and one of the dry countries of the globe. It has an area of 120,000 square miles, but its population was scanty, only 7 souls per square mile. Arabia occupied a unique position in the map of the Old World. It is situated at the meeting place of the 3 continents Asia, Europe, and Africa. Hence it commanded a central position of the globe when America and Australia were not discovered. It is surrounded on the north by the Syrian Desert, on the south by the Indian Ocean, on the east by the Persian Gulf, and on the west by the Red Sea. As it is bounded by water on 3 sides, the Arabs call it the Jazirat al-Arab, or the Island of Arabs. The vast region of Arabia may be divided into 3 parts, namely Northern Arabia, Middle Arabia, and Southern Arabia. Northern Arabia is a land of immense trackless deserts. About 1/3 of the peninsula is covered by sandy deserts. The largest portion of this desert area is known as Adana. Lying in the middle of the southern part of Arabia, where there are oases, there are living beings. Though a portion of Adana Desert is situated in Middle Arabia, a few cities have grown up there. Hijaz, Najd, and Unskal divisions, Al-Asa, are the provinces of Middle Arabia. The coastal region of Hijaz is fertile and cultivable. Makkah, Madinah, and Taif are the 3 chief towns of Hijaz. Jeddah and Yanbu are its main ports. The southern portion of Arabia, which consists of Yaman, Hadramaut, and Uman, is thickly populated and celebrated for its commerce and agriculture. This is the most fertile region of the whole of Arabian Peninsula. The richness and variety of its products won for it in ancient times the name of Arabia Felix, or Arabia the Fortunate. The climate of Arabia is extremely dry except in some. Coastal towns and watered valleys. The people are generally hardy, and they possess robust health due to the influence of its typical climate. Though Arabia is surrounded by water on all sides except the north, it has practically no river worthy of mention, if there is any. It is not navigable. The small, its influenced streams which exist here and there make the strands fertile. Rainfall is scanty, but where there is water, the land is remarkably fertile for the production of coffee, indigo, dates, vegetables, and fruits. The date palm is the queen of trees in Arabia. It is a friend of the poor and the rich alike. Without it, life in the desert would be unthinkable. The uses of the palm tree are as numerous as the needs of man. Its fruit is the staple food of the people. Its stones are crushed to provide sustenance to the camel. Its fermented milk is the luxury. Drink for the Bedouins. Its wood is almost the only fuel in an otherwise treeless land. Its branches provide material for mats and roofs, while the tough fiber of its bark can be one of the cherished used for ropes. The date palm dreams of a Bedouin who always longs for the two black ones, that is, water and dates. The coastal regions produce fruits and vegetables in large quantity. Yemen is the most fertile tract in Arabia. Wheat and coffee are found in abundance in this region. Agriculture is also possible due to rainfall. Millet and rice are produced in some parts of Oman. The frankincense plant is the most valuable product of Hadramaut and Mara. It has occupied a special place in the main commercial products of Arabia. Camel, horse, sheep, and goat are the principal domestic animals of Arabia. Of these animals, camel is the most useful in Arabia, without which desert life would have been inconceivable. It is the ship of the desert. Besides acting as a ship in the sandy desert and providing the Bedouin with his main vehicle of transport, the camel is the medium of exchange. The dowry of the bride, the price of the blood, the profit of gambling, and the wealth of a sheikh are all computed in terms of camels. It is the Bedouin's constant companion, his alter ego, his foster parent. Drinks its milk instead of water, which he spares for the cattle. He feasts on its flesh. He covers himself with He makes his tent of its hairs, and its dung he uses as fuel. The camel is so necessary to the Arabs that Umama once said, "The Arab prospers only where the camel prospers." It played an important part in the early conquests of the Muslims. The Arabian horses are the finest in the world. In the 8th century, Arabia used to export horses to different parts of the world. Goats and sheep are the chief property of the Bedouins. Races of Arabia. Arabia has been inhabited by various races at various times. Arabia was the original home of the Semitic race. Arabida. According to Arab tradition, the Arabs were divided into 3 races, viz., Arabida, Arab Ariba, or Banu Qatan, and Arab Mustariba. The earliest settlers of Arabia are called Arabida. Bida or Badia means jungle. Badias are called Bedouins. Banu Qatan is the second race of Arabia. As they used to live in Yemen or South Arabia, they are also called Himyarites or Yemenites. This race is known in history as Arab Araba, real Arab. With the rise of Qatan in South Arabia, actual history of Arabia began. The settlers of North Arabia are called Arab Mustariba. They are the third race of Arabia. They are the descendants of Ismail, son of Ibrahim. Ismail had a name Adnan, and he had 2 descendants named Nizam and Madar. This is why the Ismailites are also known by the name of their predecessors as Adnanites or Nizarites or Mudarites. The Quraysh family of the Holy Prophet belonged to the Ismailites, inhabitants of Arabia. The people of Arabia fall into 2 groups, viz., the dwellers of the cities and the dwellers of the desert, the Bedouins. The dwellers of the cities settle in one place, and they know how to till lands and grow corn. They have their business transactions within their country as well as other countries. They are more refined and civilized than the Bedouins, who do not like the idea of settled life. The Bedouins wander from one place to another with all their belongings. In the midst of their journey, they temporarily halt at places where they live, in tents. They have different tastes of life. To them, sheep and camel raising, horse breeding, hunting, and raiding are the only occupations worthy of a man. They have no charm for agriculture and all varieties of trade and craft. Attack, counterattack, loot, and plunder are the evils inherent in the very system of Bedouin life. They do not like to sit quietly for a long time. If a Bedouin cannot find any enemy to deal with, he gives an outlet to his enemy irresistible urge for fighting by falling upon his own people. In this respect, an Arab poet says, "Our business is to make raids on the enemy, on our neighbor, and our own brother, in case we find none to raid but a brother." The Bedouins have special love for their fellow tribesmen. When a member of a tribe commits any wrong, the whole tribe not only endorse his action, but also share responsibility with him. "We do not ask our brother," says a poet, "for reasons and explanations for a crime when he appeals for help." The Bedouin patriotism is neither national nor territorial, but strictly tribal. Tribalism constitutes the chief feature of the social life. No tribe can command the loyalty of a member if it fails to protect him. "Be loyal to the tribe," says a bard. "Its claim upon its members is strong enough to make a husband give up his wife." This tribal system provided a constant source of fighting amongst the Arabs of pre-Islamic days. None can deny the fact that the physical feature of Arabia has an important influence upon the mind of its people. The desert land saved the Arabs from the invasion of the foreigners on the one hand, and made them a nation of traders on the other. Arabia, being a trackless desert, could not attract the attention of the outsiders. "This is why," says P.K. Hiddy, "the Arabs have escaped foreign domination for centuries." As the Arabs are to struggle constantly with the desert, they become persevering and industrious. Their unrestricted life in the desert has also fostered in them the spirit of freedom and individualism. This love of freedom has never made them accept the domination of others. The early European historians have great admiration for the love of the Arabs. Strabo says, "The Arabians were the only people who did not send their ambassadors to Alexander, who had planned to make Arabia the seat of his empire." For these qualities, the Arabs, after their conversion to Islam, were able to create a vast empire and civilization in the history of the world. Condition of Arabia at the advent of Islam. The period preceding the rise of Islam is known as Ayyam-i-Jahiliyyah, or Age of Ignorance, in the history of ancient Arabia. According to P.K. Hiddy, the Jahiliyyah period, which in a sense extends from the creation of Adam down to the mission of Muhammad, but more particularly, as used here, covers the century immediately preceding the rise of Islam. The period was so called because the political, religious, and social conditions of Arabia were of the worst order. The pre-Islamic Arabs had no inspired prophet, no revealed book, no clear-cut religious ideology, and they had no idea of the system of government, no idea of moral and dissent life. Their religious, as well as political life, was on a thoroughly primitive level. Political. During the Age of Ignorance, the whole of Arabia, except certain portions of the north which were under the subjugation of the Persian, and the Roman empires enjoyed complete independence. The Arabs were divided into many tribes, while each tribe had a chief of its own, generally known as sheikh, to whom they owed their allegiance. Those belonging to the same tribe were on friendly terms. The relation between the members of different tribes was very hostile. The Arabs did not hesitate to go to any length, even they were ready to sacrifice their lives for the honor and prestige of the tribe. In the absence of any centralized government, these tribes were always in conflict with each other at the slightest pretext, and the war between the conflicting tribes sometimes continued for many years together. The Battle of Bassus, which originated from a she-camel beating between Banu Bakr and Banu Taglib, lasted for 40 years. The War of Dahis and Gabra, name of horses, fought between the Abes and its sister tribe, Dubian, over a horse race continued for several decades. The tribal raids and wars were thus a matter of everyday life. There was no systematic law in the country. Might is right was the law in the land. Politically, Arabia, at the advent of Muhammad, peace be upon him, was torn into pieces by the rivalries of its own unruly tribes, by the intrigues of its neighboring states, and by the rapacity of its Jewish colonists. Economic. The land of Arabia was barren. There were no agricultural and mineral products, hence the people in general were economically depressed. They earned their livelihood by tending cattle. People of a higher status like Abu Bakr and Uthman carried on inland and foreign business. They were economically better off, but their numbers were few and far between. The practice of money lending based on the system of usury was in vogue among the Jews, who treated their debtors very severely. Cultural. Though there was no educational system like that of the modern age, the Arabs of this period were not altogether devoid of culture. They were famous for their language and poetry. The language of the pre-Islamic Arabs had been so rich that it can be compared with the developed languages of modern Europe. The perfection of the Arabic language was the greatest contribution of the age of ignorance to emergence of Islam. P.A. Hiddy says, the triumph of Islam was, to a certain extent, the triumph of a language, more particularly of a book. Another cultural achievement of the pagan Arabs was their poetry. The poetry of the period was national in influence, but not in spirit. The theme of poetry was not the Arabs, but the Arab tribe. In their songs and poems, the poets of the Jahiliyyah period sang of their tribes, of war, of the feats of courage of their tribal heroes, and above all, of fair women and lovers. In those days, poetry was no luxury for the cultured few, but the sole medium of literary expression. Galan ibn Salama, of the tribe of Taqif, is known to hold once a week a literary gathering where poems were recited and where literary discussions and criticism took place. The poems of pre-Islamic Arabia are one of our important sources for the study of the history of this period. They throw light on all aspects of pre-Islamic Arabia. Imrul Qais, Tarafa bin al-Abad, Harith bin Hiliza, Antara bin Shaddad al-Absi, and Amr bin Kulthum were some of the important poets in pre-Islamic Arabia. Religious. With the exception of the Jews and the Christians, the rest of the Arabs were idolatrous. But the religions of the Jews and the Christians were in a moribund condition. Their religions could not in any way contribute to the material and spiritual well-being of the Arabs as a whole. The pre-Islamic Arabs were mainly polytheistic. They worshipped many gods and goddesses. Each tribe had its own god and goddess, and every family had its own household deity. The most important of these gods and goddesses were Al-Usa, Al-Lat, Al-Manat, and Al-Hubal, who were held in high esteem by the Arabs. Yagush, Wada Nasser, etc., were minor but important deities of Arabia. Al-Hubal was a special god of the Quraysh of Makkah. Al-Lat, Al-Usa, and Al-Manat were female deities. Among the Bedouin Arabs, they represented the goddesses of the sun, the planet Venus, and fortune respectively. But in Makkah, they were regarded as the daughters of Allah. Polytheism in its worst form was practiced in Arabia. The Kaaba was the center of Arab paganism. It has been said that idolatry was first introduced into Arabia by Amr ibn Luhaya, who brought the great idol Al-Hubal from Hait in Mesopotamia and placed it in the Kaaba. There were 360 idols ranged round Al-Hubal, the chief deity representing in the form of a human being. Every year, men from different parts of the country used to come here to pay homage to their gods. During this time, a big fair was held in Arabia, and the fair was called the Fair of Ukaz. Besides idol worship, the Arabs worshipped the sun, the moon, the star, and the air. They had fallen so low that they would worship pieces of stone, tree, and sand heap. The kissing of the black stone and the circumambulation of the Kaaba, which form the important items in the rites of the Muslim pilgrimage, are legacies of the pre-Islamic practices. Human sacrifices prevailed, and beliefs in spirits, jinns, fairies, and oracles were universal in Arabia. They did not believe in the oneness of God, the immortality of human soul, and the day of judgment. Only a section of the Pipi of Madinah, called Hanif, believed in a vague monotheism. Waraka bin Nawfal and Zayd bin Amr belonged to this section. Social and moral. In an age of darkness, the Arabs were endowed with courage, dogged tenacity, wonderful memory, sense of self-respect, feeling freedom, love and allegiance for the tribe and tribal leader, simplicity, generosity, hospitality, and last but not the least, the knack for poetry. But these good qualities were outweighed by bad ones. During this dark age, the firmament of Arabia was overclouded with injustice, vice, and superstition. The position of women there was worse than that of the women of any other country in contemporary history. The pre-Islamic Arabs regarded their women as chattels and looked upon them with bitter contempt. Women had no rights and no social respect. A man could marry as many wives as he liked and could divorce as he wished. When a father was informed of the birth of a daughter, his face would turn pale with grief and anger. Sometimes the father buried her alive in spite of her soul-harrowing cries. Many a father killed his female children for fear of poverty, as it is stated in the Holy Quran. And kill ye not your children for fear of poverty. We provide them with livelihood, and you also, surely, killing them is a heinous sin. Polygamy and polyandry were prevalent among the Arabs. Besides a plurality of wives, a man could have unlawful relations with a number of sweethearts. Married women were allowed by their husbands to conjugate with others for the sake of offspring. Girls of coquetting disposition often used to go to the outskirts of the city, where they allowed the menfolk to take full liberty with them. Stepmothers were married to their sons, and sometimes sisters also used to be married with brothers. Women were not entitled to have the share of the property of their deceased husbands, fathers, and other relations. Such a miserable and obnoxious life women were leading before the advent of Muhammad, peace be upon him, who lifted them up from the depth of lowliness to the position of respect and dignity. Slavery was in vogue among the Arabs. They treated the slaves most inhumanly, possessing the authority of life and death over them. Marriage among the slaves themselves was not legal, and free marriage was prohibited under frightful penalties. The society of Arabia was steeped in vice, superstition, and barbarism. The Arabs were so inouche given to superstitions that they would not undertake any work whatsoever before they consulted their idols through the help of oracles constituted by arrows. Human sacrifices at the altar of the temples were not infrequent. Social inequality, persecution, drinking, gambling, plundering, and other heinous vices were rampant among them. The moral and material condition of Arabia in particular, and that of the rest of the globe in general, was so deplorable that it could not but call for divine interference. The conditions which operated before the birth of Jesus Christ nearly 7 centuries before now operated with greater forces and vehemence. Hence was the advent of Muhammad, peace be upon him, in the soil of Arabia, because of all the countries of the world, her conditions, political, religious, and social, were the worst. Thus, when the whole of Arabia was groaning under oppression and torture, injustice and cruelty, vice and superstition, Muhammad, peace be upon him, appeared as a blessing to the Arabs and the whole universe.